Parked all right. You've arrived in a British pub in the early 1960s. Settle into your seat. You can shake a few hands and maybe start a few conversations. Let's meet some of the characters you might encounter in this setting. Maybe they're regulars. Maybe they're just passing through. They're all real people. Well, most of them, with stories based on those who lived and breathed the 1960s. And if you like meeting new friends, don't forget to introduce yourself in the comments. Let's get started. First up, there's our landlord. This is Frank. He looks like the kind of man who won't cut you any slack. He runs a tight ship, this pub, so don't think about sneaking a peek into his office. The door is always propped open, and he keeps an eye on everything. His wife is a different matter. She's the heart of the place. A welcoming smile, a ready word. For everyone, she moves between tables carrying plates piled high with plowmen's lunches and hot pots. The couple have been running this place for 10 years now, ever since they left London, tired of the sirens and the crowds. They found this village pub and fell in love with the peace. Frank loves the football. On Saturdays, you'll find him glued to the radio results, listening out for Manchester United. He takes his football seriously. You know, he has a soft spot for kids. Don't be surprised to see him teaching youngsters how to strike a proper penalty kick in the car park after school. When the weekend rolls around, he switches to rugby league. Now, he never played himself, but his dad did. Apparently, he could break a man's tackle like nobody's business. Frank also loves a good pint of bitter. No fancy bottled beers for him. Give me a local mild or a Burton Pale. That's more like it. Beside Frank at the bar is Jim. He's a joiner by trade. Neat and tidy. He always wears a shirt and a tie even when he's off work. He's got a gentle nature and a quiet way about him. If you catch him on a good day, he'll tell you a story or two about his days in the RAF serving in India. Far from these peaceful shores. At 42, he's seen his fair share of adventure, and he's got the scars to prove it. These days, he prefers a peaceful pint of cider, no ice, no mixer, just straight from the barrel. He's a family man, married with 3 children, and you'll often see him down at the cricket pitch on summer weekends, cheering his youngest lad on. Next, we've got Joe, a retired miner. He worked down the pits for over 30 years, hauling coal and dodging the odd caved-in roof. These days, he likes to keep a low profile, usually sitting in the same corner seat with a pint of bitter. People say he looks like Burt Lancaster, but he'll deny it till the end of time. Miners were a tough lot, proud and private. Joe fits the bill. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's worth listening to. One day, someone dared to suggest that miners weren't as hard as butchers. Joe just raised an eyebrow and said, "Have you ever seen a butcher crawl through mud for hours on end?" Right next to Joe, perched on a bar stool, is Maggie. She's a firecracker of a woman, quick with a joke and a pinch on the arm if you're taking along to buy your drink. She's got a big heart, bigger than her frothy head on her pint of cider, and she's always ready to lend a hand to anyone in need. She's a bit of a gossip too, and she's always got the latest news from around the village. And over there in the corner is Bertie. He's got a twinkle in his eye and a mischievous grin on his face. He's got more tales than a book, most of them involving faraway lands and daring adventures. He's got a slight limp, a souvenir from his days in the army, and he's got a taste for exotic beers that he brings back from his travels. He's a bit of a character, that's for sure, but there's a sadness behind his eyes that you can't help but notice. He's seen a lot of the world, but he's never really settled down. He's always on the move, chasing the next adventure, the next pint, the next story. Now, let's talk about music. Which artists or bands do you think would be playing in a pub like this in the early 1960s? Well, let me introduce you to a few. There's the Rolling Stones, brash and raw. They burst onto the scene with hits like Satisfaction and Paint It Black. Then there's the Kinks, Ray Davies and his band, spitting out social commentary with tunes like You Really Got Me in All Day and All of the Night. How about The Who, Pete Townshend and Roger Daltrey belting out anthems like My Generation and Pinball Wizard? And who could forget the Beatles? They were the biggest thing in the world. The Mop Tops from Liverpool, who turned the charts upside down with I Want to Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, Can't Buy Me Love, and of course, Hey Jude. Can't imagine a 60s pub without a few Beatles tunes on the jukebox. Now, if you had a piano in the corner, you might hear some of the Everly Brothers hits echoing around the room, like Wake Up Little Susie or All I Have to Do Is Dream. And then there's the Shadows, the instrumentalists who made the guitar sing like nobody's business. Think Apache and the theme from Z Cars. Oh, and don't forget the British invasion. Bands like the Dave Clark Five and Herman S. Hermits brought their own brand of pop to the U.S. And back, we're talking Glad All Over and Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter. These tunes were all over the radio and in the pubs. And how could I forget the one and only Tom Jones? Belting out is not unusual in Delilah and making the ladies swoon. But what about the classics? Songs that have stood the test of time? Well, the Everly Brothers definitely fit the bill. Imagine the sound of their close harmonies echoing around the pub as they sang Wake Up Little Susie or All I Have to Do Is Dream. Then there's Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Their upbeat tunes like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day would get everyone toe-tapping. And who could resist Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll? Songs like Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock might have been a few years old by the 1960s, but they were still getting everyone dancing. And then there's Chuck Berry, the guitar legend. His hits like Johnny B. Good and Roll Over Beethoven would have been a staple of the pub's jukebox. Now, there's something special about hearing these songs in a place like a British pub. It's like stepping back in time and joining a community of music lovers, raising a glass to the legends of yesterday and today. So here's a question for you. If you could have a pint in any pub in history, which era and location would you choose? And who would you ask an old regular? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more Journeys Through Time. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Lost in Time. Until next time, keep exploring the past and raising a toast to the stories it holds. Cheers. The United Kingdom in the 1960s was not just swinging, it was swaying. And at the heart of that movement was the pub. So let's keep exploring what those evenings sounded like. Which songs did they sing? What feelings do they call to mind today? And what does it mean to feel nostalgia for a time we never lived through? This is the third episode of our series. Let's get into it. Music in the 1960s British pub is like the heartbeat of the community. It pulses beneath the chatter of customers and rises to fill the room during singalongs. It's a soundtrack to laughter and to life. First, let's get the basics. When I say pub, I don't mean a place to grab a quick drink before hitting a nightclub. I mean a place with a big lounge area, often with a raised stage, tables and chairs, but also space for dancing. It's the kind of place where people settle in for the night. Some come to listen to live music or to sing along. Others want to dance and stay until closing time. Pubs aren't like clubs, but they aren't like homes either. They're somewhere in between. For many people, they become a second living room, and like any living room, the music flows from there. But what kind of music was playing? Well, in the early 1960s, ballad singers and groups specializing in traditional music hall numbers perform in the pub. Later in the decade, they share the stage with young bands playing pop and rock. During the week, there may be a piano player. On weekends, larger groups with guitars and drums pack the dance floor. As the years pass, the sound changes, and while skiffle bands with washboards and tea chests still tap out lively tunes, most of the music is short, sharp, and electric. In Liverpool and London, the Mersey Beat bands shake the foundations with hits like Ferry Cross the Mersey and You'll Never Walk Alone. And later, other groups capture the spirit of the times with hits like I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You. From the jukebox comes the latest recording of the Zombies, the Dave Clark Five, or Donovan. On the wireless, the Rolling Stones or the Beatles. Music isn't just something that fills the background. It's a living thing. The music is raw and immediate, shot through with youthful energy. Sometimes it feels like the future, but more often it feels like a direct line to the past. Music in a pub isn't precious. It's about participation. Let's picture a Saturday night in a 1963 pub. The smell of stale beer hangs in the air alongside pipe tobacco and spilled peanuts on the table. Empty glasses form a constellation around a half-smoked cigarette. Most of the customers are men. They've worked all week, so now they relax with friends, enjoying a pint and a bit of banter. They talk about football, the weather, the latest news. Maybe one of them got married, so everyone congratulates him. Some men play darts. Others stand at the bar, waiting for their round to finish. On the wall, a hand-painted sign reads "No fighting." Another says, "Please don't feed the jukebox too much money." A red curtain hides the stage, which tonight will be empty. There's no live music, so the men rely on the jukebox. They can choose between Bing Crosby, Lonnie Donegan, or the newest single by Helen Shapiro. They decide on that last one. It starts playing. Then someone pulls out a songbook. It's threadbare. Its pages spotted with beer. He asks if anyone wants to join him in a song, and they do. Soon, the whole room is singing. The sound isn't pretty, but it's powerful. Voices are thick with beer and emotion, sometimes startlingly beautiful in their roughness. The men clap their hands and stomp their feet. A few try to dance, but the floor is too crowded. The jukebox ends the song, and they start drinking again. In the corner, the older men watch the others. They've known each other for decades. They fought together in the war, shared cigarettes and jokes. They lost their best friends to mortar fire and shrapnel. Now they lean against the wall, silent and still, their faces lined and creased like old books. When the pub is full, they prefer the quiet. They nod their heads to the music, remembering a time when they danced to something similar. They don't sing along. They know these songs were hits before their time. They don't want to remind themselves how much has changed since then. A younger couple joins them. They look at each other and smile. The man holds his partner close, twirling her around, hiding his face in her hair. She laughs and clings on tight. At the bar, a friend watches them, shaking his head and smiling. He thinks it's cute, though he never had the nerve to do anything like that. He remembers when music like this first arrived in the pub. It felt shocking. Everyone talked about the latest records, the hottest groups, the biggest stars. The pub became a battleground. Between generations, older men stuck to tradition, younger ones gravitated towards the new sounds. Some of the regulars complained that the new music was too loud. It made their ears ring and their bones rattle. It wasn't like the good old days. That made the young men laugh. They thought the old songs were corny and kitschy. They couldn't understand why anyone would want to listen to them. As the night goes on, the crowd thins. A few stragglers remain, leaning against the bar, talking quietly. They sip their drinks, thinking about the day ahead. For some, it's Sunday, which means an early start. For others, it's Monday, meaning another week in the office. They know the same faces will fill the room tomorrow, but they also know that something will be different. The pub is like life, always changing, always surprising, but always with a good song. Before we go, we need to answer a question. Which song would make the whole pub stand up and sing in your town? What kind of tune brings back memories of family, friends, and fun? Do you remember the first time you heard the Beatles? Did you dance the night away to Donovan's Catch the Wind? Or maybe you were too young for that. Which song do you sing when you're washing the dishes or driving down the highway? Do you close your eyes and imagine yourself back in a pub with a cold glass of beer? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd also like to thank everyone who supported us by liking, subscribing, and sharing our videos. Keep doing that, and we'll keep telling stories about extraordinary places and the music that made them come alive. Until next time, take care. Thank you for joining me on this trip back to 1960s Britain. If you're new here, subscribe for more time travel adventures and make sure you press the bell icon to receive every notification. It's free. Join the journey. In our last episode, we saw a British village on market day in the 1960s. We heard the sounds of laughter, haggling, livestock, and a child's balloon drifting above the crowd. In the center of the village stood the Red Lion, its door a portal to another world. Today we enter the 1960s pub and see what life was like inside. This is a production by Vox Nobis in partnership with a museum. 1967. The United Kingdom is a world leader in television, rock music, and revolutionary hairstyles. Inside this pub, there's a revolution going on too. But here it's quieter, slower, and it's been brewing for centuries. The revolution is in the beer. Tied to ancient brewing traditions and powered by Italian carbon dioxide, cake beer is taking over from bitter, becoming the dominant force behind the bar. The revolution is also in the air. Beatlemania has replaced wartime austerity, rock and roll optimism, and a working week that now starts on Monday. It's called the Swinging 60s, and although the youth may be dancing to new music, the pub remains forever unchanged. For now, walk into any 1960s pub and you meet a social map. The bar is divided into tribes. There are the regulars, always the same people with the same habits, sitting in the same place, often drinking the same beer. Tradesmen with lunch pints and newspapers folded under one arm. There are the older men who come after market, reading price lists and discussing crops. There are women who meet on a Thursday for a quiet chat. And there are young couples who test a new freedom. They gather around the jukebox, a kind of nightclub without the lights. You pay a penny for a song, but the music doesn't come from the record. It comes from you. Your choice of Cliff Richard, Rolling Stones, or Elvis, filtered through a horn and a needle, and then poured out of the speakers like melted gold. So many different people, so many different conversations. Where do you sit? How do you meet them? What do they talk about? And what rituals do they follow? In the 1960s, Great Britain had left the war behind, but not its deference to authority. The pub was still a man's place, but women were increasing their presence. Men usually took the first two stools at the bar, women the last two. Men might have dominated the pub, but women controlled the home, and a man would do well to hear what she had to say. You find a seat enjoying the conversation, and as you do, you notice rituals stitch these groups together. The landlord's nod counts as greeting and verdict. He knows your drink, your credit, and your conversation. He might be gruff, but he's fair. Regulars know their drinks. Most don't stray from what they like. Those who do get shown the ropes by the bartender. Everyone knows when it's closing time. Every drinker keeps an eye on the clock. When the bell rings, it means last orders. There's a communal pause, a gentle urgency as mugs are raised, coins clink, and the last jokes are told. The bell rings again and the bar falls silent. They lock the doors and switch off the lights. The regulars file out, each knowing his pint is waiting when he returns. The Red Lion isn't just a place to drink, it's a place to play. Card games and darts are more than games. They're ways to measure skill, patience, and temperament. The darts champion will be watched like a local hero. A lost match is teased for the next week. For a young man, the pub is a proving ground. His confidence is tested, measured by the amount he drinks and the number of games he plays. A full house plays its hand, shows its cards, sings along with the jukebox. Darts are thrown, footsteps echo, voices rise. The landlord watches, listens, learning the stories of everyone in the room. And sometimes, despite the laughter and the last orders, a pub brawl breaks out, a fight that begins in anger and ends in laughter and a chorus. 1 pint of bitter and 1 lemonade. The bell rings for closing time. The pub empties. Soon enough, the same faces return, their hangovers banished by the morning sun. The landlord wipes down the bar. He cleans the windows. The brewery hasn't changed the pumps. For him, there's little point in progress. Each barrel tastes the same. Then he hears voices outside. The market has returned, and soon his pub will fill once more. The pub is also a stage for courtship. Men and women sit side by side, exchanging stories that might lead to Saturday dances at the town hall. They've known each other since childhood. The girl works at her father's shop. The boy delivers milk. Their families have been to the same church. Maybe their mothers want them to marry. Maybe their fathers already have the wedding planned. Courtship in the 1960s is a dance of glances, gestures, smiles, and silences. The language of love is spoken at every table, but the rules are strict. Girls wait for boys to ask them to dance. They wait for a kiss goodnight. They never go anywhere alone. Evenings are spent with chaperones. The future is uncertain. There's no birth control pill. An unplanned pregnancy can ruin a life. Love can blossom in a pub, but it needs tending. On market day, you plant the seeds of romance. On Friday, you dance at the town hall. On Saturday, you hold hands under the picture house. Sunday, you're back at church. And between the flirts, the fights, and the card games, jobs are arranged at the bar. The builder finds a plasterer for tomorrow. The milkman hears about an extra root. The butcher gets a recommendation for a new cow. The joiner learns of a barn to fix. These men work hard. This pub is their social safety net, a loose network of favors and information. This community relies on word of mouth. No business cards, no contracts, only handshakes sealed with beer foam. They drink to ups and friends, loyal customers, and to good health. Sometimes they raise a glass to a fallen comrade, someone who drank in this very pub, laughed at these very jokes, but never made it home. Sometimes they toast a new beginning, a new marriage, a new baby, or a new life. Sometimes they don't need a reason. They just raise their glasses and drink to friendship. At the bar, a job is done, a birthday celebrated, a deal struck, a disagreement forgotten. The landlord holds court, keeping order and dispensing wisdom. He sees everything and says nothing until closing time. By the last orders, he'll know if someone has spilled bad news or good. He'll know who's left and who's staying behind. If something happened today that was spread on social media, it's first discussed here, face to face, voice to ear, beard to nose, and by the time it reaches Twitter, it's missing the humanity that fills this room. You listen to the locals. You learn the history of the area. You hear about those who have moved away and those who have died. You discover how the war ended and how peace began. You listen to the old storyteller, the young singer, or the tradesman with the news. Who would you follow? Let us know in the comments below. Share your memories with the world. Question for you: if you could sit at any table in this pub, who would you listen to first? The old storyteller, the young singer, or the tradesman with the news. If you like the story so far, press like, subscribe, and tell us which character you follow. The 1960s was a decade of change. Television arrived in almost every home, reshaping leisure time, influencing fashion, and creating stars overnight. Music became a global language. Rock and roll echoed around the world. The Beatles were welcomed in America. Returning servicemen brought home American trends. People questioned authority. Working practices were challenged. Young people demanded a say in society. And yet the pub remained rooted in tradition. Its rhythms and rituals had survived the war. It continued to offer a haven of familiarity. In the heart of a changing world, its locals remain connected by history, hops, and hearth. But what happens when that generation moves on? What happens when new locals take over? Do they keep the old ways? Do they bring in the new? How does the 1960s shape the pubs of the future? Join me next time for the final part of our 1960s time travel adventure. If you've ever flicked through an old family photo album, you might have come across pictures of people you didn't know in places that look strangely unfamiliar. For me, these photos often feature my parents as young adults with friends at a place called the pub. The word itself is probably old enough to be considered antique. While its meaning has remained consistent, its spelling has shifted over time. Originally deriving from the Latin publica, meaning public, it first appeared as an abbreviation in 1598, evolving into the shortened form we use today. By the late 1960s, though, the pub was changing, and the changes tell a bigger story. As I researched this series, I realized just how much of the 20th century's history was enacted here, and nowhere more so than in the United Kingdom, where pubs have been a constant throughout my family's history. This is the first episode in our time travel series. Every week or two, we'll visit a different period in history to find out what life was really like. And today, thanks to your suggestions, we're off to the United Kingdom in the swinging 1960s. The decade brought new drinks, new music, and new faces. Lager and continental tastes began to arrive. The traditional cask ale faced competition. Young bands took the stages in coffee bars and clubs, yet many pubs adapted, opening their doors to new styles, modern jukebox hits, and eventually live bands. The social fabric around the pub shifted to post-war mobility, new employment patterns, and television changed how people spend evenings. Yet despite these pressures, or perhaps because of them, the 1960s also preserved things that later decades would lose: a sense of everyday intimacy, the near-universal permission to sing, and a habit of solving community problems face-to-face. Many of the photographs we treasure from the era show smoke-filled rooms, a laughter-caught mid-gesture, proof that ordinary places hold extraordinary memories. What was a typical British pub like in the 1960s? To answer that question, let's look to the experts. In his book, The Story of the Pub, author and pub historian Elin John describes the average local boozer as a place full of misfits, eccentrics, loners, and dreamers, united by the simple pleasure of a good beer. While he writes that conversation could turn quickly to politics or religion, locals generally kept things lighthearted, making the pub a place where everyone could feel welcome. This echoes the sentiment I gathered from real-life locals. When I visited a traditional pub in Yorkshire, established in 1879, it's the kind of place where old men play darts, and football is always on the television. It's the sort of place that hasn't altered much in the last 150 years, and yet change was afoot. From the outside, the pub seems unchanged. But walk inside and you'll see that while the furniture is old, the clientele has diversified. What has made this possible? Why do places like this survive? According to Professor of Planning and Policy at Liverpool University, Carl McClay, pubs are deeply embedded within the social fabric of communities. They're where people go to socialize and meet their friends, particularly those who don't drive. This makes them vital to the well-being of those who use them. But back in the 1960s, there were signs that the pub's role in society was shifting. People no longer lived above the shop. Families had smaller budgets and rising aspiration, and with the advent of cars, people could travel further for entertainment. The growth of chain pubs, self-service bars, and fast food outlets offered cheaper, faster alternatives to the local. So why did people still go? Perhaps it was because these places offered something more than a drink. Historian and author Pete Bailey writes that the pub in the 1960s was a place to escape the stresses of work and home life. It was an adult world where you could escape the rules and regulations of everyday life. If there was trouble, it was contained within the four walls of the pub and did not impinge on the wider community. This idea of the pub as a microcosm of society is explored in the photographs of Bert Hardy, whose images capture the humanity of everyday life in Britain between the wars until the 1970s. One such picture shows us a group of smartly dressed men and women enjoying a drink at a table. At first glance, they appear to be laughing and joking heartily. On closer inspection, however, there's an undercurrent of tension. The man standing leans towards a seated woman, his words causing her to recoil. This hints at the tensions and conflicts of the outside world intruding upon the pub's sanctuary. Hardy's photographs are imbued with a nostalgia for a disappearing way of life. He died in 1992, which means that unlike him, I can never capture the sights, sounds, and smells of the era firsthand. Instead, I have to piece together my own experience through archives like photographs, films, oral histories, newsreels, and television together. These sources transport me back to another time and place and allow me to imagine myself in the smoky haze of a 1960s pub. In a few weeks, we'll be back, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. We're trying to build a community here, and you're an important part of that. What should we explore next? 1969, a swinging time to be alive. Hi there, welcome to this house. Today we head to the heart of London to a famous pub said to have been a haunt of Charles Dickens. It's had many names over the years, but is best known simply as Ye Old Cheshire Cheese. Now it's just a normal pub, albeit a very busy one. But between 1964 and 1968, it was the setting for a weekly radio show called Spotlight on Saturday. Hosted by disc jockey Jimmy Grant, the hour-long program featured live performances by some of the biggest names in the British music scene. The Rolling Stones, The Who, The Animals, Donovan, Freddie and the Dreamers, Dave Clark 5, Small Faces, Tom Jones, Cilla Black, Chris Follow Out of Time, Georgie Fame, and many more graced the tiny stage in what became known as the most famous hour of live pop music in broadcasting history. Some acts like Donovan were paid, but many others appeared for free in return for some invaluable exposure. This was before the days of MTV, after all, and with only one television channel in the UK, getting your music heard was largely dependent on the radio. As the pub was something of a bohemian hangout by the swinging 60s, its narrow, low-ceilinged rooms, crammed with mismatched furniture and cluttered with bric-a-brac, suited the era's counterculture perfectly with its gaslit lamps, exposed brickwork, and dark wood paneling. It looked as though it might have been a set from a period drama. In reality, it was just a tired old pub, much in need of refurbishment. But in the right hands, it could also become a time capsule. In 1964, Jimmy Grant had the idea of broadcasting his radio show live from the pub. By the following year, he had persuaded the pub's landlord to let him close off the upper rooms to customers and install a proper stage. On March 23, 1965, the first episode of Spotlight on Saturday was broadcast from the second floor. It was an instant success, not least because the pub's beer cellar doubled as a makeshift recording studio. Soon, record labels started sending their biggest acts to appear on the show. If they weren't already famous, they would be soon. For some acts, their appearance at the pub was a career highlight. For others, less so. Dave Clark, for example, had a chart hit with Glad All Over in 1964. He was at the height of his fame, so when he turned up at the pub expecting a big stage and a great sound system, he was rather disappointed with what he found. Despite the shortcomings, however, he still put on a good show and his single reached No. 2 in the charts. A version recorded live at the pub, but while the show's popularity soared, its budget remained tiny. In 1967, Jimmy Grant's contract with the BBC was not renewed, reportedly because he had asked for a pay rise, having gone several years without one. The last ever episode of Spotlight on Saturday was broadcast on December 1968. After that, the pub returned to normal. As you watch today, consider this. What should we see from that time? The warmth of personal contact, the rituals of toasting and singing, or the musical bravery of early performers? Ask yourself which pub memory matters most, and tell us in the comments. Now it's time to make a decision. Are you ready to take a trip back in time to experience history firsthand? Or perhaps you want to learn about important historical events and people through fascinating objects and personal stories? If you love exploring historic places and uncovering their secrets, then don't miss out. Click here to subscribe and join us on our journey through time. Raise your cup and keep the stories alive.